A couple traveled to Las Vegas for their honeymoon and checked into a hotel suite, excited to start their vacation. However, when they entered the room, they immediately noticed an unpleasant odor filling the air. The husband, wanting to resolve the issue quickly, called down to the front desk and asked to speak with the manager. He explained the situation, saying the room had a terrible smell, and requested a different suite. The manager apologized for the inconvenience, but informed the couple that the hotel was fully booked due to a large convention in town. As a gesture of goodwill, the manager offered to send the couple to a restaurant of their choice for lunch, compliments of the hotel, while he would arrange for a maid to thoroughly clean their room to try to eliminate the odor. Grateful for the lunch, the couple went out to enjoy their meal. After a relaxing lunch, they returned to their suite, but were disappointed to find the smell lingering, just as bad as before. Frustrated, the husband contacted the front desk again and informed the manager that the odor had not improved at all. In response, the manager, clearly concerned, promised to find them another room at a different hotel. Unfortunately, after calling around to all the hotels along the Las Vegas Strip, he discovered that every single hotel was fully booked because of the ongoing convention. The manager returned to the couple with the bad news, explaining that there were no other rooms available in the city. However, he assured them that his staff would give the room another thorough cleaning to try to resolve the problem. The couple decided to go out and explore the Las Vegas attractions and do some gambling while the room was being cleaned. The manager, determined to address the issue, gathered all of the housekeeping staff and headed to the suite to investigate the source of the persistent odor. They searched the entire suite but found nothing unusual. The cleaning crew changed the sheets, replaced the towels, took down and replaced the curtains, scrubbed the carpet, and used the strongest cleaning products available to sanitize the room. After they completed the extensive cleaning process, the room seemed freshened up, and they hoped the issue was finally resolved. When the couple returned a couple of hours later, however, they were immediately hit with the same foul odor. At this point, the husband was exasperated and decided to get to the bottom of the mystery himself. Determined, he began inspecting every corner of the suite, trying to locate the source of the smell. Finally, as he lifted the top mattress off the box spring, he discovered the horrifying cause. The body of a deceased woman had been hidden there all along. My wife and I were on our honeymoon in Hawaii, spending time on the island of Oahu. One afternoon, we were sitting on the beach, enjoying the sunshine and the waves. At some point, my wife got up to use the restroom. When she returned, she looked unsettled. She told me that, as she was walking into the bathroom, she noticed a man staring at her in a creepy way. When she tried to leave, he stood in the doorway, blocking her path. Thankfully, 2 other people walked into the restroom at that moment, which made him step aside, allowing her to slip out. Concerned, I asked her what he looked like, and she quickly glanced around, but he was already gone. Our hotel was only a short walk from the beach, so we decided to head back. On the way, we spotted a police officer patrolling the area and informed him about the man who had been harassing my wife. Feeling a bit more at ease after reporting it, we returned to our room, freshened up, and then went out for dinner at a nice seafood restaurant. We walked around the area afterward, trying to enjoy the evening. By the time we returned to the hotel, it was close to midnight, and we were ready to relax and wind down after a long day. Just as we were settling in, there was an unexpected knock at the door. I looked through the peephole and saw a man standing there, dressed in a maid's uniform. I opened the door just enough to speak to him, but before I could say much, he immediately tried to push his way inside. Startled, I pushed back, asking him what he wanted. He claimed he had left something in our room while cleaning earlier and needed to retrieve it. This didn't make sense, as we had left the "Do Not Disturb" sign on our door all day, meaning no one should have been inside our room. As I processed this, I noticed the man kept glancing at my wife. Suddenly, she screamed, "That's the man." I didn't fully understand at first, but there was no time for explanations. In an instant, he lunged at me, one hand gripping my throat while the other reached behind him. He pulled out a knife and began swinging it at me. I struggled to hold him off, but it was my wife's quick thinking that saved us. She grabbed a lamp and smashed it against his head, momentarily stunning him and giving us a chance to escape. The noise drew people out from the surrounding rooms, and soon, one of our neighbors started screaming, adding to the chaos. We quickly called the police, and so did the hotel staff. The entire situation escalated into a huge, chaotic scene, but we were just thankful to be alive. When the police arrived, they took statements from us and a few other people who had witnessed parts of the incident. We still don't know exactly what this man's intentions were, but I suspect he had targeted my wife from the moment he saw her on the beach. It's disturbing to think that he thought he could get away with something like this in a public hotel. My wife, our 2 kids, and I were on a road trip from New York to Florida, making our way to Disney. We were nearing the Florida state line. Driving through Georgia around 11 p.m., I wanted to make it all the way to Florida that night to avoid paying for an extra night at a hotel. So I kept driving as my wife and kids slept in the car. The highway was quiet and nearly empty at that hour, and I didn't see any other cars for miles. Until, off in the distance, 2 red flashing lights appeared. They didn't look like police lights, but more like SOS signals. I slowed down as I approached, trying to be cautious. When I got closer, I saw a car parked right in the middle of the road, blocking traffic. There were 2 cones on either side of it and 2 flashing SOS lights on the ground. Then, 2 men wearing hooded sweatshirts came out from behind the car and started walking toward us. They were African American, and I could see one of them coming up to my window. My instincts kicked in, and I put the car in reverse, ready to get out of there fast. As he reached my window, I cracked it open just slightly to see what he wanted. When I asked if he needed help, he simply replied, "Yes, open the door." Immediately, I rolled up the window. I saw him reaching into his pocket, so I put the car back in drive, floored it, and drove over the cones and SOS lights to get past their car as quickly as possible. About a minute later, I noticed a pair of headlights racing toward us from behind. By this time, my wife had woken up and was confused, wondering why I was suddenly speeding. I tried to stay calm, but I told her we were being followed and to keep quiet for a moment. The car tailing us started flashing its lights, and suddenly, I heard a loud popping sound. I felt the car begin to lose control but managed to keep it steady. Just when I thought I had things under control, I heard another loud pop, and the car started dragging. I told my wife to call 911, realizing we didn't have much time. By now, our kids were awake, scared, and crying, as my wife frantically tried to relay our situation to the police. I kept the car moving as best as I could, but the vehicle behind us began ramming into our trunk. My wife was screaming at the dispatcher on the phone. The kids were terrified, and I honestly thought we weren't going to make it. But then, out of nowhere, I heard a siren and saw the flash of red and blue lights in the rearview mirror. The police car came up fast behind our pursuers, who immediately veered off onto an exit we happened to be passing. The police officer followed them down the exit, while I pulled over to the side of the road, trying to catch my breath. I took the phone from my wife and gave the officer a rundown of everything that had just happened. Upon inspecting the car, I realized that both our rear tires had been blown, likely shot at, which I mentioned to the officer. About 10 minutes later, another police car arrived, along with a triple-A truck to help with the tires. The officers told us they'd managed to apprehend the 2 men, thanks to a tip from another driver who had come across the same roadblock. Fortunately, that person had managed to turn around and call the police before falling victim to their trap. When my sister was in her 20s, she went on vacation with her now husband, and one of their stops was Street Martin. They rented a car to get around the island, allowing them to explore freely. One day, while sightseeing, they decided to take a scenic side road that seemed pretty remote, with no buildings or signs of civilization around. It was a peaceful route, though quiet and somewhat isolated, and my sister mentioned that it was likely just a dead-end road. As they drove, they noticed something unusual up ahead, a car that looked like it had run off the road, with only the rear end visible, sticking out from the tall grass and crops along the roadside. The vehicle was an old, rusty neon blue car without any branding. Curious, my sister's husband decided to pull over and stop to check it out, but he told her to stay in their car. She watched him as he got out and approached the abandoned car, looking through the windows to see if anyone was inside. Suddenly, she saw him jump back, as if startled by something. Concerned, she got out of their car to see what had caused his reaction. They both crouched down to look underneath the rusty vehicle, and what they saw was horrifying. Beneath the car were two adult men, each holding a large knife, with a bloody, lifeless body lying between them. Without hesitation, my sister's husband sprang up, grabbed her, and quickly guided her back to their car, practically pushing her into her seat. The two men under the car had started to crawl out and were now standing, watching them. Her husband jumped back into their car just in time, sped away down the road, and kept driving until they found a populated area, making sure they weren't being followed. Once they felt safe, they called the police to report what they had seen. This experience was so unsettling for both of them that they seem uncomfortable whenever the topic comes up, so we don't talk about it much. However, I can tell that it affected my sister deeply. Ever since, she seemed a little different. When I was 16, my summer started with a big family trip, a 10-day Royal Caribbean cruise through Florida and the Bahamas. Our grandparents had organized the vacation for all of us: my parents, my two brothers, my sister and her boyfriend, my aunt and uncle, two cousins, and of course my grandparents. My older brother, Rob, who was 20, and I spent a lot of time together. And we managed to share a cabin by claiming our dad was staying there, which technically wasn't allowed. One night, Rob and I were in the ship's nightclub. I'd snuck in by borrowing someone else's ID card, feeling pretty thrilled to be there, until I noticed a strange man sitting by the wall, watching me. He looked older and gave off an unsettling vibe. At first, I wasn't sure if he was really staring, but every time I moved, his head followed me. Feeling increasingly uncomfortable, I decided to leave. Outside the club, I ran into my sister and her boyfriend sitting at the bar, so I sat with them for a few minutes to shake off the encounter. But then, I spotted the same man from the club sitting across the room by the bar, still watching me. I pretended not to notice, though my heart was racing, and debated whether or not to tell my sister. In the end, I kept quiet and quickly walked back to my room, feeling paranoid and glancing over my shoulder the whole way. When I finally made it safely, I was relieved, convinced the man was just a creepy stranger. A few minutes later, there was a knock at the door. I got nervous, but it turned out to be Rob, so I let him in, and we didn't see that man again, at least, not until the next night. Around 1 a.m., Rob, my sister, her boyfriend, and I went to one of the restaurants on board for a late-night snack. They weren't planning to go to bed anytime soon, but I was tired and decided to head back to our room alone. However, when I got to the hallway, I noticed that our cabin door was slightly open and the lights were on. I knew we had shut it when we left, and it seemed too late for housekeeping. I cautiously opened the door and looked inside. No one was there, and everything seemed untouched, so I assumed maybe Rob had come back at some point and left the door ajar by accident. Feeling uneasy but convincing myself everything was fine, I went to bed. Some time later, I woke up in the dark, feeling something brush against my cheek. I realized it was a hand. Half asleep, I brushed it off, muttering for Rob to cut it out, until I looked over and saw Rob still asleep in his bed. That's when I let out a terrified scream that filled the whole cabin. Rob jolted awake, turned on the light, and we saw the man from the club standing beside my bed. Without thinking, Rob jumped on him, punching him, and I joined in, throwing all my strength into defending myself. The struggle lasted less than a minute before frantic knocking erupted at the door. Our parents had heard the noise, and my dad helped restrain the man while we called the ship's customer service center. Security staff arrived quickly, took him away, and locked him in the ship's jail for the rest of the cruise. We never found out exactly what happened to him after that, but the whole experience left me deeply shaken. I don't think I'll ever be able to go on another cruise again. It's an experience that will stay with me for life.